Hi everyone, this is a video response actually to a video that was made by my good friend Beatle Brad. He started making a video talking about whether or not to keep it or to pitch it. And I think pitch it means as in like getting rid of, shrink wrap on your albums. And he asked a lot of us if we wouldn't mind making a response video. And that's what I'm here to do today. So I'm going to do that. And I know some people have already made response videos. We had, just off the top of my head, I know Fit to be Tie-Dyed, Paul made one. And we also had, I believe, Sergeant Pepper's 13 did one. And I don't know who else at the moment, but those are the two that I've seen. Now, I've made videos about this subject before, whether or not to keep records in their shrink wrap and why you have a reasoning as to do it or not do it. So I'm prepared here to show a lot of records. Now, I've always been of the belief, first of all, I've said this many times, people think that, and there's an old myth going out there, that if you keep the shrink wrap on the records, you're going to wind up getting them warped over time because supposedly the heat will tighten the shrink wrap, the plastic around the record, and it will kind of like squeeze the jacket of the sleeve of the record, and that will cause the disc itself to bend. And I really shouldn't call it 100% myth or old wives' tale or anything like that, because sometimes it does happen. Although it's mostly urban legend, I have seen it happen a couple of times with me, and I'll explain it. I think that, say I have 1,000 or more record albums, I can only recall 2 instances where shrink wrap on records, and I bought them used, resulted in tightening. I'll get to that as I go along. But to start with, I'm going to show this album here, Shut Down Volume 2, The Beach Boys. This is an album that is in its original shrink wrap, and this is from the 60s, and you can pretty much see that there's no problem here. Now, a lot of albums from the 60s and the 50s, the cardboard is so thick here, and I'll try to give you an appreciation for that, that no matter what happens with the tightness, you're not going to get this buckling up and bending. I think there are some instances on thin sleeve jackets, thin cardboard, I should say, maybe certain import records or really cheap records that are made with almost like, I think, poster board, that those would be more inclined to maybe bending or warping. But if you have an album here like this, many albums I have in the shrink from this vintage are like this. I'll show you another Beach Boys, although I don't think I'm going to take, I have the plastic here, outer plastic cover, I'm going to leave it on, but here's another one that's in its shrink. And there's no warping on this, I like to leave the shrink wrap on, as you can see, and as you know, if you've watched a lot of videos of mine. See here again, the cardboard on some of these are so thick that you're not going to have an issue. I think records from the 50s and the 60s, certainly you don't have a problem with. When you get into the 70s and the 80s, which again, I'm going to get to that as I go, I think when you get to the 70s and 80s, if anything, that's more of a potential to get a bend with the shrink getting tight. Although I still rarely, if ever, come across it in my experience. Here's another early album. I'll take this one out because it's an easy slip-on. Simon and Garfunkel, Sounds of Silence, original shrink wrap. And sometimes you'll get this, you'll get like the shrink wrap kind of like maybe tightens a little bit and recedes a little bit over the years, over the decades. I mean, you're talking about albums that are well over 50 years old here, and there's no problem whatsoever. The record inside is not warped on any of these. All right, so next one I'm going to show you is an Elvis Presley record, and this is not a 50s Elvis record. This is an Elvis record from the 60s. It's a reissue, but I'll tell you why I brought this along here. Elvis's Golden Records. Now, maybe you can already tell. If you look really close, and I'm going to hold it on the right angle, you can see, there is a good shot, how tight this is. This is very tight. It's really adhered to the sleeve, you know, over the decades. And I believe this is a 60s press. It really got tight. You can see it's very unforgiving there. But again, the cardboard is so thick. Let's go to the 70s. I talked about the 70s. You know, I said, I think some of the albums, and especially the later 70s, can be kind of cheap with the kind of material they made. Now, here are two albums by the Runaways. 1977. I think both these albums in 1977. The Runaways, Queens of Noise, and Runaways, Waiting for the Night. And again, we have that situation here where you can see, like with the Simon and Garfunkel, it kind of pulled away a little bit here. But there's no danger to the record. I'm going to pull out one of these. Let's see which one I'll do. Maybe I'll take the Runaways, Queens of Noise, just to show you what I'm talking about with the difference as far as the jacket. Now, I don't know if you could tell, but this is a little thinner than what we had with the other albums, the Beach Boys and Elvis. It's a thinner board here, thinner cardboard. But still, the record's in great shape. There's no problem with warpage or anything on this. And this is another album, like the Elvis one before it, where, and the camera might not do it justice, but this is pretty tight. It's really adhered to it. If you look close, you can see it's kind of stuck good on there, kind of tight over the decades. But I'm trying to hopefully convince people that you don't really have a problem, for the most part, with albums warping. Now, there are exceptions. If you keep your albums, maybe the person who owned it before you kept the album in an attic or something where it got really hot, or by maybe a radiator or something, that's a different story. Any record could warp, you know, whether it's in the shrink or not. Here's another example. This is the hype sticker. This is why I just love having records like this, the way you would see them in the store. If you were to go into the store in 1978 to have another 70s album here, you'd see this Blondie Parallel Lines record. And I like having them the way they would look when you bought them in the store. Again, much thinner cardboard there. But there's no danger. There's no problem. This is Light of Day, and this is the first album I'm showing you that I bought in the shrink sealed. This has never been opened. This is from 1987. Now we're into the 80s, okay? And now you're talking really thin. I mean, this is really, really thin. And what I do is sometimes I'll keep an album like this in the shrink wrap with the hype sticker sealed when I can find a sealed album. Now, I have no intention of ever opening this. I like to also collect sealed albums sometimes as a collector's piece, just like you would do a museum piece. Now, I also have another copy of this one for playing. So, I have no problem keeping something like this just as is and never opening it. Now, is the record in here warped? There's no indication that it is. The shrink doesn't seem overly constricting or, you know, tight or anything like that. But here's what I say, folks. I say that if the record is warped in here, I'll never know it because I'm never going to open it. This is going to go with me to the grave. So I'm not looking to profit. I'm not looking to save sealed albums because I want to like do a flip and make a lot of money. I'm not trying to do that. I do them just for my own aesthetic enjoyment. So if the record is warped in here, I'm never going to know it. And as I've said, this one here is a second copy that I use as a playing copy. So in certain cases of albums that I really like, I will have a copy to keep sealed and a copy that will play. This one here, again, this is open, by the way. You can't really tell. I'm not going to take it out. It's got one of those resealable sleeves that are a pain in the ass. But this is the record that I play, which also happens to be in the shrink wrap. of this particular record. Now we've got a bunch of Beatles stuff. I didn't want to leave the Beatles out. I mean, here's a lot of, like, some of us grew up listening to the Beatles. My girlfriend bought me this shirt. You can't really read it all here, but that's what it says. So, here's a copy of an album that everybody knows. The Beatles, 1962 to 1966, from 1973. I found this in its original shrink wrap, and on the back it's even got the sticker that has the song listing on it. And I have no intention to ever open this. Now, this is a gatefold. Two things I want to say before I get, all right, now, again, we got the thicker cardboard. Look at that. I don't care how tight this is not going to warp. The cardboard is so tough, it's never going to tighten and warp. But it has a gatefold, and that's the question. How do you see a gatefold cover? If you want to have a gatefold, you have to take the shrink off, otherwise you can't open the gatefold. And I don't have this in doubles yet. However, I do have the blue album of this, the red and the blue. I have the blue version, 67 to 70. That one does not have shrink wrap on it, and I can open that. It has an identical gatefold. But in instances where I'm going to want to see the gatefold, I will take the shrink wrap off. Here we have another sealed album. This is a sealed copy of the Beatles' Rarities. This is released in 1980. It's another thin kind of cardboard. This is a first pressing, by the way. This is another thing I'll throw in. The reason it's a first press, there's a couple of reasons. We won't go into it. But for one thing, it does not say produced by George Martin down here. There's other reasons you can tell too, but we'll save that for another video. It has the hype sticker contains the infamous butcher shot. And the only way you can see the butcher cover is, this is a gatefold, as you can see, and it flips open. That's sealed, and I'm going to leave it that way. When I want to listen to the album, I have this copy here, which is also in the shrink wrap, and I can take the record out and I can listen to the record. But I cannot access the gatefold. I may be on the lookout for another copy sometime just to open the gatefold. This particular gatefold has a lot of nice photographs in it, so it's good to have. This one is a second press because down here they added finally produced by George Martin down there. So that's how you know that. Here's, again, just to show it, another 1977 sealed copy, never opened, of the Beatles' Love Songs. This is pretty tight. This is a pretty tight shrink wrap, but I don't think we have any danger here of any warpage. And again, I'm never going to open this, so it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other. Maybe after I'm gone, somebody gets it and wants to open it, and I don't know why you would. I mean, there's a lot of, believe me, where I come from, there are tons of open copies of this. You want an open copy, get an open used copy. Don't ruin it for a collector. Recently, 2016, the way the records are made now, a lot of the 180 gram vinyl and heavy duty thick records, they make these things so sturdy, really. There's no warpage going to be on these albums. That's one decent thing you can say. But anyway, this is the Beatles Live at the Hollywood Bowl, the reissue from 2016. I bought a sealed copy, not going to open it. This is the reason I want to show you this one is I bought another copy because it was cheap enough. It didn't cost a lot. This one I took the shrink off, and it has a gatefold. So yes, once in a while, I will take off the shrink wrap so that you could access the gatefold. The Beatles help. And you can see how beautiful this looks. I mean, this is why I keep it in the shrink. It's in the shrink wrap. This happens to be pretty sturdy, tight shrink at this point. And a lot of times the German albums or UK albums or foreign albums, or the non-US albums, I should say, will be kind of tight. You can see, it's not translating well on the camera, but there's kind of a buckle there. You can see the record indentation here. Maybe not clear on the camera. Let's go for another example of a thin cardboard that maybe could potentially be hazardous as far as warping goes. This is really the most flimsy one I have here. This is a 12-inch single, Jealous Guy, and this was released in 1985. And it's in shrink, but this is kind of a loose-fitting shrink. It's not very tight. Again, I'm never going to open this. If I want to play Jealous Guy, I've got the Imagine album. But this is still cool. And again, there's no problem here. As thin as it is, there's no warping going on here. There's no bending. Now, if you recall, early on, I did say that I was going to talk about a couple of incidents where I did indeed get records that were warped because the shrink was too tight. I went to, this is the first one I'm going to show. I went to a record show several years ago and I bought this Ruddles album. It was in the original shrink wrap. And I would have thought the cardboard was not too thin. I liked it because it had the sticker. But when I got the record out and played it, it was warped. And I don't know if you'll be able to notice that. Well, I can notice it, but I don't know if you will. This is a useless record, by the way. I don't think it shows so well on the camera, but this is warped because of the tightness, and it's useless because it doesn't play. So if I bend it, don't worry about it. If I manhandle it, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter, it doesn't play. The needle does jump off the record on this. So why do I have it? I have it because, like I said, you can see the hype sticker and everything, but I've since bought a nice plain copy, and this does not have shrink wrap on it, and it's a gatefold and a book. And this one that I got has news clippings in it too, by the way, I should mention, is actual news clippings, whoever had this, and this is a booklet. So you really want to access this. You don't really want to leave this one sealed because it's got so much stuff in it to see. But this is an example of one that I bought. And when I got the record home and played it, the needle was a warp record isn't too bad if it'll sound good. But this one, the needle was popping off the record. I want to also mention there was a Rolling Stones record. It was called Around and Around. And I don't have it anymore. But it was in shrink wrap, and the cardboard was all wavy. It was very thin stock, very thin cardboard stock, and it was all kind of wavy. And sure enough, the record was warped. That's the other second example. As I say, I've only found 2 examples out of 1,000 or more where I had warpage. This is the last item I want to show, and it's going to be a little experiment. I'm going to take the shrink off this one for the first time. It's the Omega Man, my all-time favorite movie soundtrack. And of course, it's a newer record. This came out in 2018. I think this is last year. Now, this is so thick, you're not going to have any issue here with this. This is not going to get squeezed or warped. It's really sturdy cardboard. But this does have, I believe, something of a gatefold, so I want to check the gatefold out. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off. I'm going to try actually sliding this off. So, bear with me here a little bit. I want to be able to possibly replace the shrink after I pull it off. So let's do this. Okay, so I've taken the shrink wrap off, and I think this is an example where I may not be able to slide this back on. Maybe I don't even want to. I may just take it and keep it inside the gatefold. But for an album like this, I really would like to be able to access the gatefold. And you can hear it cracking the first time I'm opening it. And there it is, kind of like hyping the movie taglines and poster art commercialism. So this is really, really nice, and I want to be able to access this. I'm happy to just take the shrink and put it inside. All right, anyway, so that's it. I hope you had some fun with this. What do you think? Let me know. Take care.